Archie, I'm down 20%. I'm going to cash.
Well, Jimmy, you might be turning a temporary problem into a permanent problem. I'm Archie Hoxton.
And I'm Rob Hoxton.
And this is Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. Welcome back to the Last Paycheck Podcast, brought to you by Hoxton Planning and Management. I'm your host, CFP professional Archie Hoxton, and joining us again today is our new host, Jimmy Sutch. We're going to be talking about an interesting and, what's often kind of an uncomfortable topic, scary topic, and that's what should you do in a bear market? Or maybe a better question, what shouldn't you do in a bear market?
Yeah, you hear about like the bears and the bulls, and oftentimes we get more phone calls when we're in a bear market. So let's discuss it.
Yeah, and maybe we'll start with definitions. You can think bull market, the market's growing; bear market, the market is contracting. And there's, I think, in order to qualify for a bear market status, it's like got to be down 20% in a year.
20%.
So,
And we skipped over what we would call a market correction even, which is the first step of panic or worry, right? So a market correction, which happens about once a year, is a decline from the peak of the stock market about 10%.
Yeah.
Right? So that's when you start getting a couple extra phone calls that you didn't anticipate. But 20% actually qualifies for a bear market.
Right.
Bear markets, interestingly enough, I don't know, they last about 10 months on average.
Yeah, on average. And on average, they happen roughly every 4 years or so. So these are things that are relatively frequent, but as far as what the market does most of the time, we're not in a bear market. Most of the time, at least historically, we're in bull markets. But these things come along and they tend to feel longer than the bull markets because that's when you're not really worried, you're chugging along, life is just dandy. And the bear market comes along or correction comes along, and all of a sudden, you're kind of locked in. The news is all talking about it. Your account is down, and uncomfortable.
It's interesting, right? It's 10% declines happen about once a year, right? 20% bear markets happen every 4, 5, 6, 7 years, like every market cycle or economic cycle. But they're common, they're frequent, but they're always unexpected.
Yeah.
Right? You're never expecting them. So it's interesting. And what do you think some of the things, like if I'm a client and I'm calling Archie and I'm about to, jump off the curb or maybe step off the curb.
Yeah.
Right? What do you tell them?
Well, I always think the first thing is don't panic, right? Because these are things that, like we said, they happen relatively frequently. So you have to be able to keep your cool and then not make rash decisions. So a lot of times, if I'm fielding a call about this, I will usually start by going back to the financial plan and saying, look, and this is true of any good financial plan, accounts for bear markets and corrections and, accounts for a wide variety of scenarios. Some of them are worse than have ever happened, right? Accounting for bear markets that like we've never even seen before. So I usually draw attention back to that and say, hey, look, we've built this into your plan. We expected this to come. We didn't know when it was going to happen, but we knew it would eventually happen. And so, we've planned for it. And you know what? You're going to be okay as long as you stick with the plan and don't make changes out of fear and, emotion.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about having a financial plan, right? It's not necessarily overly interesting when everything's going straight up and, it's flowers. But, when times get a little challenging and a little worrisome, when you can go back to that financial plan, which is essentially a probability analysis, that probability analysis accounted for, good markets, bad markets, flat markets,
Yeah.
right? And every market in between. So it's perfect going back to the financial plan too.
That's where I usually start. And sometimes, you get someone, and this is a common, I mean, it's when you're looking at your account and over the course of a few months, you just see it go like this. Your hard-earned dollars that you're going to be living on for the rest of your life. When you see that happening, it's natural to feel fear and frustration and, I mean, all kinds of different emotions and it's also natural to feel like I need to do something to stop the bleeding. Like I need to take action and make a change in my investment portfolio or sell my investments and sit in cash and wait this thing out. But sometimes and oftentimes that's maybe the worst thing that you can do.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that behavioral finance, which everybody talks about, right? It's, you read a headline or you consume too much news and you get worried, and you think the world is ending when in fact, if you just look out your window, things aren't necessarily that bad. You see that a lot this last particular year, right? It was an election year, right? So there was certainly a lot of worry, but nonetheless, you kind of look out your window, the market's finished fine, and yeah, we were strong. We had a good year.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's one of the kind of investing greats who founded Vanguard. His name was John Bogle. He had an interesting quote that I always liked and I come back to. It's like, and I'm going to butcher it. I don't have the actual quote, but it was something like sometimes when the markets are like that, all you want to do is something, anything, but what you should do is nothing. So that sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like a bad idea, but really, making changes under those circumstances can be more detrimental than it needs to be.
And oftentimes, when you're working with somebody like myself or Archie, it's, the portfolio investment allocation or strategy takes into consideration whether or not those downturns make you really, really worried.
Yeah.
So hopefully you're in a portfolio that kind of aligns with the type of investor you are, and the corrections aren't quite felt as bad as somebody that might be a little bit more aggressively invested.
Right.
Another thing that is nimble, kind of push the investments aside. Most of the time you don't want to respond, right, to a headline. But do you ever work with people being a little bit more nimble in terms of distribution rates and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's another important thing. And this again comes back to planning, financial planning, where there's the old rule, the 4% safe withdrawal rate that goes like, over 30 years, if you start drawing 4% of your portfolio value and then increase it with inflation every year with a 50% stock, 50% bond portfolio, that should last all 30 years. But that's sort of oversimplified. It's a rule of thumb, like it's a heuristic. It's meant to be sort of thrown out there for anybody to use. But in financial planning, you can be more nimble, like Jimmy was talking about, where you change your spending rate. And when the markets are up and doing well, maybe that's when you take the big trip.
Right. And not everybody's in this position, and we completely understand that, right? Like some people are taking their distributions, they're taking whatever it is amount they need and are required to live, right?
Right.
Some people don't do that. Some people, tend when the markets do really, really well, or, their account's up 15% or something like that, they take a little bit more and they kind of dance while the music plays, right?
Yeah.
So then on the flip side of that coin, they understand they can't take that cruise in a year where the market's down 20%, and they would rather leave that, couple extra bucks in the account to hopefully reaccumulate and come back. So you see that from time to time, a distribution strategy or distribution engineering based on a little bit of a response to the investment environment.
Yeah. I think that's it's great. It can help you kind of maximize your spending and spend more as long as you're willing to cut back in certain years. So and that's something that it needs to be driven by the financial plan, probably should be done with a professional um, to help drive the financial plan there and help you determine, well,
How much more should I take?
and how much should I cut back when the market's down.
Yeah.
So
Another common theme that Archie and I see quite a bit, and this is again pulling the investments back into the picture now,
Yeah.
right? We'll get a phone call or an email or something like that and almost request or inquire about going completely to cash, right? Hey man, I saw this on the news, X, Y, and Z. The world's on fire. Hey, I just want to put everything in cash or a CD,
Yeah.
right?
Wait it out.
And sometimes that can be oftentimes that can be very, very detrimental to your long-term wealth.
It's tempting and it gives you some short-term relief, but you're choosing sort of a short-term relief potentially over your long-term results. And it could change how much you can spend for the rest of your life.
Right. And you hear, most of you watching probably have heard, right? Time in the market, not timing the market.
Right. Yeah.
And so we kind of respond to those folks. One, we start with the financial plan and let them know that, and the financial plans are almost fluid breathing documents, right? You can go to them, you can run that scenario, and you'll get a score. Your probability analysis will reflect the current market environment. If the markets in your accounts have pulled back by 10, 12, 15, hopefully not 20%, but sometimes when that bear market hits, right?
Yeah.
So it'll still give you a sense of whether or not you're kind of in the green and you're on target to meet your long-term objectives. But timing the market, investment-wise, is challenging, right? Because you got to be right multiple times,
Yeah.
right?
You got to be right that there's going to be a pullback. You got to be right about when the pullback starts, and you got to be right about when the pullback ends and the markets get back to growing. That's 3 times to be right. You have to time it 3 times, not just once, because there's serious consequences to missing the best days in the market, which are often clustered right around the worst days in the market. So if you're going to try to time it, there's a really good chance that you miss the most important days to be invested, which can have devastating effects on your long-term results. Yeah, I mean, and we have some information here.
Yeah, Archie and I, it's astonishing. So we'll kind of, JP Morgan had some information out, and over the last 20 years, if you would have stayed completely invested, you would have gotten 9, 10%, right?
Yeah.
What's that say? If you would have missed the 20 best days over 20 years.
If you missed the 20 best days over 20 years, you would have averaged 2.8%.
Which is essentially losing to inflation.
Yeah. I mean, that's like that's less than 1/3 of the results.
Right.
If you just stuck it out, and that's riding out the bad
Markets all the way through, and that includes 2008, the financial crisis. That includes 2020. That includes 2022. All these nasty markets, riding that out through all the ups and downs. But if you miss it, I mean, you'll never catch back up.
And on the flip side to that, ironically enough, and Archie and I will get a lot of eye rolls when we would say this to people, because remember, this is during a time of uncertainty, right? And Archie and I, just being students of investing in the markets, when that time of uncertainty is there and kind of apparent, right? That's almost the best time to get your cash to work too, right? So oftentimes for the people that did have, money in CDs or money at the bank sitting there in cash, when that pullback of 10, 20%, happens, it might actually be a time of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I often look at it like this, and it depends on if you have cash available if you're still accumulating and saving for retirement or other objectives, those few bear markets that you get in your lifetime leading up to retirement are the best investing opportunities you'll ever get. And so if you have extra cash, and if you're not contributing to accounts at all, make sure that you don't stop during that time, or that you start if you're not, or you put that extra cash to work and buy as many shares of investments as possible when the market's down like that.
And that's why you see a lot of success in qualified plans, right? So in a qualified plan, just call it your 401k or your 403b or 457. You signed up for this thing. I'm doing 4% of my paycheck. Regardless of what you see in the news or what you read about, on X or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, right? You're putting that 4% of your paycheck into that account. Even if the market's down, you're buying more shares.
Yeah.
So it kind of removes all that decision-making and that behavioral finance flaw, right, that we all have, right? So, that removing that and doing it and sticking it kind of to the game plan is a reason why a lot of people find success in those qualified plans.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Now, I know we're kind of up on time. We could probably talk about this for hours.
Too
It's
long.
a fascinating topic. But, just to kind of wrap up, when we get into a bear market, refer back to your financial plan, stick to the plan. Don't make changes to your investments out of fear. And if you have cash, put it to work. These are some of the best opportunities to make up ground and get ahead. And if you like the show, we hope you do. Please leave us a comment with
Thoughts, questions, potential future topics for investments.
Please.
Share with your family and friends. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. And hope to see you next time. You've been watching Last Paycheck, weekly wisdom to help you retire and stay that way. If you like this show, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Last Paycheck is available anywhere you get your podcasts.